Joined by Emily Boyle with the press review. And Emily, you're starting us off with the French papers. What do you have for us?
Well, a lot of papers still talking about Prime Minister François Bayrou and his announcement of that confidence vote on the 8th of September. Let's start with Libération here today. They're asking whether Bayrou's perspective on the economy is realistic. Is Bayrou making too much of it? Their headline reads, the article gets 5 economists to go through his, quote, alarmist declarations. Now, some argue that none of the indications suggest an impending debt crisis. Others talk about a general slowdown of the economy and argue that businesses cannot get used to the constant political instability. L'Opinion, meanwhile, has a slightly different take on it. Here, they're explaining how Bayrou lost the battle for public opinion. It says the Prime Minister had hoped that 12 days would be enough for him to gather support from the French public in order to pressure parties into abstaining on the 8th of September. The article says that he lost that support a very long time ago, mainly due to how he communicated about the budget. Now, this cartoon in the corner there sees him being carried off by National Rally leader Marine Le Pen and La France Insoumise leader Mélenchon. The caption here reads, "It's never good to be the messenger." Figaro also has this article here today. It's looking at what the post-Bayrou could look like. If and when Bayrou falls, Macron will look to find his 5th Prime Minister in less than 2 years, a process which might take time, but which would play to Macron's advantage. This article says that a delay in the process would allow him to push the 2026 budget vote to the end of the year, creating a sense of urgency and perhaps increasing the likelihood that that budget would be voted through.
Well, Emily, that's not the only story coming out of France today. What have you read?
Well, there's another story that sits a little beyond the headlines, as we can see here in L'Humanité. This is an article on UNICEF's most recent report on homeless children in France. As kids head back to school next week, 2,159 of them will be living in the streets. Just over 500 of them are under the age of 3 years old. Now, this study is looking at how many people do not have access to emergency housing despite reaching out to social services for help. Now, the number of children on the streets has increased 30% in 2022, but this article says the numbers are likely to be much, much higher.
You take us now to Gaza, where at least 10 people have died of hunger in the last 24 hours. What are the papers saying about that?
Well, let's start with The Guardian. They're talking about the Pope and his comments on Gaza. Pope Leo demanded an end to collective punishment. He begged for a ceasefire and asked for humanitarian aid to be let in urgently. At least 313 people have now died from hunger, including 119 children. The Telegraph has a different take on the story. They have an article today written by the president of Refugees International, and he's debunking common arguments made to deny that there is a famine taking place. Jeremy Kondendik explains how the famine was determined and what factors are studied to get to that conclusion. He also debunks claims about faked images and demonstrates why the famine label is not over-exaggerated. The Atlantic has a long read, which is worth your time. When children forget the colours of foods. This article was written by Palestinian journalist Ghada Abdul Fattah. She spent a few days living with a young family in Gaza. They had been displaced and were living in tents after their home was bombed. She describes how 7-year-old Maria struggles to colour in pictures of food in her colouring book because she can't remember what they looked like. It's a very insightful and moving piece, and I recommend it for a look from the ground at what's happening.
Very hard-hitting. We're going to Greenland, which is in the papers quite a bit today. Tell us more.
Yeah, there are 2 stories coming out of Greenland today, so getting quite a lot of coverage. Let's start with the Copenhagen Post here. Denmark and Greenland have issued their first apology ever for the forced contraception of Greenlandic women. Between 1966 and 1992, thousands of women were fitted with contraceptive coils without their permission or their knowledge, and some of the women were as young as 12. There's another story coming out of Greenland that the Washington Post is covering today. Denmark has summoned US diplomats for trying to influence domestic politics. This article explains that Danish intelligence services said that Greenland has been a target for influence campaign aimed at creating a rift between Denmark and Greenland and pushing Greenland closer to the United States. 3 men with close links to Donald Trump reportedly traveled to Greenland to make lists of locals who would support Trump's plans to take over the island.
And finally, Emily, some messy celebrations have been taking place in Spain. What have you found?
Well, this is the 80th year and the 78th edition of La Tomatina de Buñol in Valencia. El País brings us the best pictures of that happy havoc. Today, the tradition started apparently in 1945 when an accidental food fight broke out, and they had so much fun they decided to make it an annual tradition. All the crowds gathered there. Now, the tomatoes are specially grown for this occasion. You can almost swim in them, there are so many. And all that's left to do now is to clean up all the mess. And I suggest this lady gets a bigger broom because there's quite a lot of it to clean up there.
Yeah, she looks like she's going to be there for a good few hours cleaning that up. Emily, thank you so much for that. Emily Boyle with the press review.